Brad, I did the unthinkable.
Oh,
I submitted.
You gotta
yeah.
attenuate these intros a little bit.
Look, we're through the looking glass here, man. It's a whole new world.
At this late date, words like unthinkable maybe hit the hackles up a little more than I can handle.
Look, okay, maybe it's unthinkable for me, okay?
In the context of like some nerdy computer project shit, it's unthinkable, let's say.
Yeah, I submitted a pull request, man.
Not like you started digging an underground shelter or something.
Look, okay, I do watch a lot of tunnel videos on YouTube.
Uh-huh.
There's that woman that's dug the tunnel under her house. I don't know if are you into the cold comfort of underground lodging?
Not yet, but maybe I should be.
I can't. Well, first, this started for me with Colin Furze, right? Colin Furze, that YouTube guy, he builds like crazy engineering. I think he started out as a welder, but he builds like motorcycles with giant counterweighted balances on the top, so you can ride on the motorcycle like 15 feet in the air.
Huh.
Sounds
useful.
He dug a hole in his backyard and put a home theater in it.
All right.
Like a 20 foot by 20 foot home theater. And then he started making tunnels that connected that to the house. And the thing he's been working on for like 2.5 years now is digging up his front driveway in like a UK kind of suburban home and putting an elevator, underground garage with an elevator that can lower his DeLorean in underneath it.
It's one way to maximize your space.
You should look at the YouTube. It's a good YouTube series because it's
when you own the property above ground, you also own the space below the ground level, right?
Well, see, that it's funny. That's what he thought. And then the local authorities had different feelings about that. So anyway, I have not started digging yet to answer your question.
Okay, that's fair. Also, I'm going to say that burying your home theater in the ground is an interesting way to solve the blackout curtain problem.
Yeah. I think he probably created a much larger echoing problem because he built it out of steel, plate steel and stuff.
Yeah. You need something absorbent on the inside.
Yeah. And also it looks wet in there in a way that I maybe wouldn't be thrilled with. But also think of how cool it would be to have like a whole, like I used to, as a kid, I had dreams. We used to get stuff shipped in like these wooden containers from the UK from my parents' business. And they were like 6 feet on a side. And we would knock, they were just kind of throwaway fir wood, and we would cut holes inside and put a door there and then connect them and make like a fort in the backyard.
That is some prime fort material as a child. It
was like having infinite stacks of pallets, basically.
Yeah.
And I always thought, what if we dug a hole and buried a couple of these, and then we'd have an underground space underneath the fort that was like better. And my parents were like, no, we're not putting you in a hole because that's how people die, trenching problems. But anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's not about me digging a hole. That's the unthinkable is not that. You got any other guesses what the unthinkable is?
I think I heard you say the words pull request at the beginning. I did. Which, for certain definitions of unthinkable, I think qualifies.
I never thought I'd be a pull request guy.
Man, you beat me to it.
I know.
I almost submitted my first pull request like a month ago, and somebody beat me to it there also. Like, they found the same issue that I did.
Yeah.
And they filed the pull request before I did. So like maybe best of both worlds, because now the thing's getting fixed and I didn't have to deal with it.
So we talked. Yeah, that's much better than having to figure it out. Like I had to look up. It was like that scene in Office Space where like, how do you launder money? And they looked it up in the dictionary or whatever. And it was basically the equivalent of, how do you make a pull request? So
okay, set the stage. What's the project? What is the bug? How did you fix it?
So the problem is that I have an AIO water cooler in my system.
Oh, I think I know where this is going because I saw you asking about building kernel modules on the Full Nerd Discord.
Yep. And they are lightly supported by a bunch of different projects. HWMon has some support. Liquid Control has some support, but there's a process by which new hardware is supported, and it usually starts in Liquid Control. And then somebody kind of ports whatever reverse engineering or whatever like hardware ID identifying business had to happen down into HWMon. And then once it's in there, you can do things like use cooler control on Linux, which is a fabulous utility that's kind of like a souped up version of fan control. And I got tired a couple of weeks ago of basing my AIO fan curves on like the thermistor that I kind of taped up on the side of the radiator. And I started Googling to find out what was supported and what wasn't. And it turns out my family of coolers has a pretty good Liquid Control driver, but they're ASUS. It's an ASUS cooler, and they do different hardware IDs for like the different SKUs. So like there's one that's like one color, and there's one that's like robot themed, and one that's white, and one that's a 240, and one that's a 360, and they all are different hardware IDs so that their software can identify them and know what stuff to put on the screen. So I was like, I would like for mine to be supported by this. And I looked at how to add that support, and I cloned the repo onto my machine, and I made the necessary changes in the Python files, and I restarted the service, and it worked.
Who wrote or maintains this driver, just out of curiosity?
So the
not
first
ASUS,
one,
right?
No, this is not ASUS. There's a project called Liquid Control, CTRL or CTL.
The same project is also doing the drivers.
Yeah, so it's the same project on Windows and Linux, and like Fan Control actually has a Liquid Control plugin on the Windows side that you can control like a whole buttload of supported AIOs with. And the reason you do this is so you can get specifically the temperature of the coolant inside the loop, rather than basing it your fan speed on like the CPU usage or CPU temperature, because the CPU temperature goes up and down, but the liquid temperature moves really slowly. And in an AIO loop, you want to base your fan curves on the temperature of the liquid, not necessarily the moment to moment spikes in the CPU temperature. So I looked up, and the nice thing about Linux in this is that if you have the AIO hooked up to a Linux machine, it's really easy to get those USB IDs for all the relevant pieces of hardware, which is kind of tricky on the Windows side, actually, because you have to pull a handful of things and basically integrate them in this Python file and update some documentation. And I got it working on my machine, and then I updated Liquid Control a couple days later by accident. It stopped working. I was like, oh crap. Okay. So I did the work again, and I was like, I'm going to submit this. And I was like, can I just like copy and paste the file into GitHub? No, you can't do that. You first make a fork of the project, then you make your changes in your version of the project, commit them to your version of the project, and then you go back to the original project and you hit the button that says new pull request, and you say, I want to do my version of this project against their version of this project. There's 5 changes or 8 changes or whatever. And most projects have like a little thing that you fill out that says, yeah, I tested this, and I did, here's what I did, blah, 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 blah. I did all the things that you want me to do before you submit a pull request. And then I hit the button that said that, and like 2 days later, it was in the software,
nice.
And you can download it from the repo.
You got merged.
Yeah, and then I did the same thing again the next week for HWMon.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's okay. That's roughly what I understood the process to be before I gave up, or rather, instead of giving up on it, like I said, somebody else did it first.
Yeah.
It was about the point where I realized I was going to have to fork and clone the repo, do it on my end, and then kind of effectively backport the change into the upstream. Look, I get it. I know that's the process. I'm sure it's all second nature once you've done it a couple times, but there was definitely a brief moment of like, this is a lot of steps. I'm not sure I have time for this. I wish it was a little more direct. I mean, I know it's like basically one button to fork a repo.
Yeah, you can fork stuff left and right. It's you're forking stuff all over the place up. But no, that part, it's funny. That part I've done before, because I use Git pages to host like static web pages for a couple of projects that I've helped people with in the past. And so I was pretty familiar with that stuff. But the merging the commits in and how to do all that was weird, because like I had actually forked somebody else's fork of the project, because they'd done the initial for the HWMon thing. I had forked somebody else's fork because they had done the changes for the overall support of the device, and I just needed to add hardware IDs to their support. So then I had to figure out how to like change my changes on their version, and anyway, so then the next step is
Git is a whole thing.
Git is
a thing, man. I just use a bare, this is here I am burning a Dual Blue Diaries topic if I were to ever show up on there, although I think you guys maybe have covered similar stuff already, but I use just a plain bare Git repo to sync my dot files between machines, and I know basically just enough Git to push and pull those changes and commit files when I change them. Anytime anything breaks in there, it's 30 minutes of Googling arcane Git error messages and running commands I don't really understand.
Well, so the weird thing about Git is every game studio I've ever worked at has one person who's actually good at Git, and then a bunch of people who have a Post-it note stuck on their monitor that are like the 3 commands that they use for Git all the time.
Yeah, that's my experience.
But then the other weird thing about Git is, in games at least, most studios are using Perforce, at least big studios are using Perforce for all the binary stuff. So the art files and the models and all that, and the game assets and all that stuff. But the program, and because Git is kind of notoriously bad about binaries, right? It's hard to do. Even the LFS product, which is specifically for syncing binaries, is not great at it. Perforce, really good at that. But the programmers hate Perforce. So Perforce has a translation layer where you can use Git commands on the Perforce repository for the engineers who are mostly working in text files. And then the artists are just using the Perforce client like sane people from inside their game engine. Anyway, syncing files is hard, it turns out.
It sure is. Just like a lot of things in computers.
Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
I'm Brad.
So the next step on that whole thing is I got to figure out DKMS.
Oh boy. I can kind of help. Kind of. Like
I might consult you.
I've done some DKMSing. Well, you're still on Cache, right?
I'm on Arch. Yeah, it's basically Arch.
I think there's two ways to automate kernel module building, DKMS, which I know Debian uses, and I think Arch also does.
Arch is DKMS, yeah.
And then there's a.k.a. mods, which is more in the Red Hat land. Red Hat and Fedora use that instead.
Yeah, I don't know anything
Although
about that.
I think you can install DKMS on Fedora instead if you want. But yeah, like I've done a little bit of DKMSing to sign ZFS modules with my secure boot keys when they get built.
I'm just afraid I'm gonna DKMS some stuff up, so I got to be careful.
Yeah,
but
I get it.
Speaking of messing things up, it's Newsweek.
Whoa. Wait, who's messing
no,
what up?
I don't think we've messed anything up. It was just a bad segue.
That was not a nice segue.
I'm sorry. I'm off. I've been at GDC a lot this week, and the Game Developer Conference with the new reduced Yerba Buena access.
Oh, is that the whole gardens thing that I've seen?
Yeah, people are upset. It sucks. It's bad.
What is it they're upset about? I'm not clear.
So the controversy this year, the mess up is that traditionally, Moscone, above Moscone North, there's a big giant park called Yerba Buena Gardens. It's been there for a really long time. It's like between the Metreon and the Yerba Buena Arts Center. And it's where people go to hang out during GDC. So like, if you don't have a ticket, you can go and you just need to have some meetings with people. You go there and you hang out and have a meeting. If you're in between, like running around to different hotels where there are meetings constantly, stuff like that, it's nice to touch grass, as the kids say.
Mm-hmm.
And this year, the Yerba Buena Conservancy started letting people who are having events in that area fence the whole park off.
Aha.
So that it's no longer accessible to the public and is only accessible to badge holders. I think the GDC concession was that it was open to the public from 11 till 2 in the morning, which is like, considering that normally you'd walk around there during GDC and there'd be 1,500 people sitting around in the grass and all around hanging out and chatting with friends and having a nice time. It stinks. It's a bad choice. Yeah. Hopefully they'll change it for next year.
Is that a public park or is it owned by the city?
No, it's owned by the Yerba Buena Arts Conservancy or Gardens or whatever project, I believe. But anyway, so GDC's fine. We got some news though. We got some GDC news. We got some other news. Like
kind of a shocking amount of hardware stuff happened in the last week.
Yeah, in a world where hardware is hard to get.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
although a lot of it is kind of future looking. We can foreshadow here, right? Intel announced some new Core Arrow Lake CPUs. Mm-hmm. Apple launched the cheapest laptop they've ever announced, and it seems like it's pretty good.
Yeah, and interesting.
My PlayStation announced an update for PSSR.
Yeah, pretty minor one there, but there's stuff to talk about.
NVIDIA is rolling out the GeForce, the DLSS 4.5 stuff that they kind of teased earlier this year for GeForce 5 series cards, I guess.
Is that coming out now?
I think it's the end of the month.
Soon. Okay. Yeah. Interesting. All right.
And then details have emerged on Microsoft's plans for the Xbox. I think that's the big one. You want to start there?
Seems like the big. Well, it is the big one in terms of the scope of the news and how much detail there, or how important and fresh and bleeding edge the information is. On the other hand, it's also vague that I feel like we have to read between a lot of lines and speculate about what they're getting at in some cases. But
like, just to put an overview on this seems like the kind of thing they wouldn't be talking about if they were still selling a lot of hardware.
Oh yeah. The current Xbox hardware business is basically moribund, as I understand it.
I kind of wonder how the current hard console hardware business is. I mean, obviously Nintendo's sold some units because they managed to sell more than 2 million copies of Poctopia. But yeah, I can't imagine that like PlayStation Pros are flying off the shelves right now either.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and even the base PS5, the price is up from what it was at launch.
Yeah.
So yeah. Anyway, yeah, all these other stories are iterative. They're all interesting in one way or another, but they're all kind of building on existing stuff. Project Helix is the next Xbox, and like that's all new. That's a whole new box that's coming. ... next year or the year after or the year after that.
Well, so
that is the place to start for sure.
There's some timing. So what's the top line, Brad?
It's called it's not called Project Helix, but that's the official code name. They came out and put a label on it. It is the next Xbox.
They're bringing AI to video games.
Mm-hmm. But it's also PC.
Well, I thought everything's an Xbox. So your PC is an Xbox, your microphone's an Xbox, your game frame's an Xbox, your Sin City poster. Those are all Xboxes, right?
Anything can be an Xbox if you want it bad enough.
Who did this talk?
I believe it was Jason Ronald.
Okay.
He's the byline on, they ran a news story on Xbox Wire that says it says this is a summary of the keynote address, and it's bylined. Byline Jason. I've talked to Jason Ronald before and heard him speak. Like he extremely knows his stuff.
Okay.
At the platform and hardware level. But I mean, Asha Sharma, who's the new head of Xbox as of 3 weeks ago or whenever it was. Time.
I don't think it was that long ago. I think it was last week or the week before.
Maybe it was 2 weeks ago. Time makes no sense now, but she had tweeted some of the top line stuff of this last week, I believe it was. So some of this was floating around out there. Project Helix is designed to play your Xbox console and PC games. Like that's the log line here. Like they are confirming the thing they have said in the past, or I'm sorry, not the thing they've said, but in the past, thing that's been rumored in the past, which is that this will play both Xbox and PC games. I feel like there are so many different ways to interpret that we have to like unpack what this means exactly.
Is there going to be an Epic Game Store and a Steam on your Xbox next or on your Helix?
So Epic did come out 2-3 weeks ago and say, yes, we are talking to Microsoft and we want to be on the next Xbox day one with the Epic Game Store.
Well, they want that because they don't want to give Microsoft a cut of the Fortnite revenue, right?
Sure. I guess not.
I mean, that's because that's their whole thing.
That leads to like one of my first questions about this thing, though, or actually, they're all the same question, just approached from multiple angles.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this thing just going to run vanilla Windows where you can drop to a desktop? Is it going to have all the runtime support that you would need to run like any piece of Windows software you want? Or is this going to be runs your PC games asterisk, where they're having these platform holders build like custom versions of the storefront apps for this Xbox? Games are maybe going to have to get like Helix verified or whatever, PC games.
Yeah. Won't
necessarily like your 15-year-old indie game that hasn't seen a patch in 12 years. Is that going to run straight out of your Steam library, or is there going to be more of a certification requirement or like some amount of like translation or compatibility that needs to be in place for games to work? Is it going to be a subset of your games? You can see what I'm getting at?
Or are they going to do like some sort of weird translation layer where they look at your Steam library and are like, oh, he owns a copy of Fez there, so we'll just give him the Xbox version of Fez to play here when he wants to play?
Yeah,
I can't imagine that seems
less likely.
Beyond the pale.
Yeah, that seems less likely. Like really, it's like there's a continuum between what is a traditional PC, which is modular, where you can replace components in it, and you can run Windows or Linux or anything else on there. You can try to game on FreeBSD if you're an insane person. And then a console, which is totally integrated, a single board design, lockdown operating system, can only run what they sanctify, right? So where on that continuum is this box going to land is my burning question about what this thing's going to be.
Well, they don't really talk about that at all.
Not really. I mean, they get into some hardware details here. So like they've said in the past, like AMD had already confirmed this as well. And this will be the third Xbox in a row to use an AMD SoC. So when they say we're doing a next gen AMD SoC, you're like, duh.
Yeah.
But they do drop the word FSR next in here, which is, I think, the first time I've heard that term. Like FSR 4 is the current one on PC, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So and that's only on RDNA 4 and newer. Right. It's not on RDNA 3 stuff, which means the old Xbox, the Steam Deck, all that is not.
I'm not up on the AMD roadmap enough to know exactly what is likely to be on this SoC in terms of RDNA, or is UDNA still a thing, or did they push back or abandon that?
Maybe UDNA was never a thing, Brad.
Yeah.
It's unclear. UDNA seems like somebody was talking about something and then maybe they shouldn't have.
Maybe the rubber met the road and they were like, oh, we're going to stick with the paradigm that we have.
Well, and for folks who don't know, RDNA is the consumer graphics architecture. CDNA is like the data center graphics architecture.
Right.
They use different microcode so that if you want to run programs if you want to run like a GPU compute thing on the data center, you compile it differently than you would if you were running it on consumer graphics. And it's honestly, it's been a problem for AMD when you look at things like Strix Halo, because they had opportunities to do that. Like they're missing out on the opportunity that NVIDIA has because all of the NVIDIA stuff just runs on CUDA. Right.
So RDNA 4 on the PC is I think we've talked about this before, but that's the architecture where AMD more or less started catching up with baseline parity with NVIDIA in terms of ray tracing and machine learning and that sort of thing, right?
Yeah. So on previous versions of AMD architectures, you basically stole general purpose compute shader time to do ray tracing math and GPU compute math. The RDNA 4 stuff has tensor core equivalence and ray tracing acceleration in hardware. So
I wonder if this AMD chip and this next Xbox is going to be RDNA 4 or 4.5.
I would assume it's a superset.
5, yeah, because I want to say the PS5 Pro was like a subset of RDNA 4. I think it was like some of the features, but not all, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they have the dedicated ray tracing acceleration and some tensor cores, but I believe it's not as fully featured as even like the current gen GPUs.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can assume PS6 and Helix are both going to be substantially beyond the PS5 Pro.
Yeah, given the timing here, so they talk about shipping alpha versions of hardware beginning in 2027.
Yeah,
which to me says it's going to be RDNA. I would be surprised if that means that the shipping hardware is RDNA 4. I would assume it's the next generation beyond that.
I think I would agree, although like consoles generally have lagged a little bit. Like I think the current consoles are sort of RDNA 2.
They're 2.5,
like,
right? Yeah,
I think the Series X is a little more powerful, might have some newer features. I think that's right. This is 5-year-old information now.
No, I think you're right, because it's the Steam Deck is 2 as well. And the whole point was, hey, we want to be able to run console games at the resolution that's shipped. So yeah, I mean, to me, if they're shipping alpha hardware next year, then that means we're not going to see anything until 2028, probably.
Maybe it depends on when. Like if they're early next year, I think they still could hit an end of next year launch, because there's definitely precedent for final dev kits going out within like 6-8 months of the console launch. In fact, in my experience, that's how it usually works. Like,
oh, that's true.
This is going way back, but I can tell you, even going back to like the 360 launch, I remember going to Sega to preview Full Auto, which was the first 360 game any of us had seen running and played in person. And that was the year of launch. That was still running on one of the giant huge,
the G5s,
like giant full-size computer dev kits, because they didn't have final 360 dev hardware to run it on yet. So like,
wait, was there something before it was in the dual G5s?
I don't remember.
Because
it might have been under a blanket. It might have been under a sheet, to be honest. They might not have actually let us see the entire box uncovered.
The earliest Xbox 360 dev kit I saw was a dual Power Mac G5, and that's because it was a RISC processor. They needed RISC processors.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, long story short, I think the original roadmap before this insane supply crisis hits was saying late 27 for both new consoles.
Yeah.
We'll see. I mean, I think it is possible that hardware could go out next year and still see the console launch by the end of the year. But
yeah, that's true.
But again, this is heavy on like kind of massaged marketing speech and light on actual numbers. They do say order of magnitude in ray tracing increase in ray tracing performance.
That's easy given how unusable the ray tracing is in current gen consoles.
Yeah, it's like almost non-existent. So although it's like decent in the PS5 Pro actually. Like,
but I don't think
because it has actual. Not really. I'm just saying that's a more recent example in consoles of actual functional ray tracing. But I mean, that, you're not wrong. That's a low bar, but that still does seem somewhat substantial.
Well, I mean, so the ray tracing in current hardware is good at the base level. Like, we're not seeing full path tracing in anything on an original Series X or original PS5.
No, not even on the Pro. Like, I'm playing Resident Evil Requiem on a PS5 Pro right now, and it's got decent ray tracing, but it's nowhere near path tracing or full.
Yeah, the
fully
Digital Foundry
generalized.
thing said that the PS5 Pro was somewhere between the ray tracing high and ray tracing, the default ray tracing on the PC version.
Yeah, I mean, the game looks very good, to be clear, but I'm sure I would like to see the PC version path traced at some point.
Well, I can make that happen for you.
All right.
I just can't play the game because it's too scary for me. I'm a giant coward. It turns out
it's it's up there.
I don't like scary games, Brad. Anyway,
There are a couple other quotes here.
Yeah.
They say that the SoC, quote, integrates intelligence directly into the graphics and compute pipeline. I think we can probably
Thank God.
tease out pretty clearly what they mean by that.
I think they mean, do you think they mean natural intelligence or some sort of artificial intelligence?
Yeah, no, I think probably what if a computer were to be able to learn to do things in an iterative
turn one
fashion.
pixel into 4?
Something like that.
Yeah. What if it could turn one frame into 2 or possibly 3 even?
Yeah. I assume this. I assume this means this will be heavily reliant on both upscaling and frame generation.
I think anytime you're talking about heavy duty ray tracing, you're going to assume that.
Although it's probably beyond the scope of this episode, but there's some DirectX news that has come out of GDC.
Oh, I missed that.
About like linear algebra support and shader programs. Effectively, like I'm way out over my skis on this stuff, but like it kind of sounded to me like what the news around the 50 cards was when those were announced. Remember all the direct integration of machine learning with like shader programs and stuff that they talked about with the 50 cards.
Yeah.
Like kind of like AI driven texture compression and stuff like that. I don't know if this is the same type of deal or not. It would make sense that AMD is following in that direction. I'm not sure.
Did this come out of the evolving DirectX for the machine learning era on Windows? Yeah.
Yeah, I believe we're talking about the same thing here. This is on the Windows developer blog, evolving DirectX for the ML era. Like, there's talk about, starting with linear algebra support in HLSL, which I think is what, high-level shader language.
Yes, that is exactly
what that stands for.
It's the unified shader language across all processors.
Right, as opposed to like some vendor-specific stuff. But like that, to unlock hardware-accelerated ML operations directly in shaders sounds like a lot like the stuff NVIDIA was talking about last year with the 50 launch.
Yeah, this is wild stuff. I got to read more about this before I want to talk about it. But
yeah, I think we're probably way out over our skis on this stuff. The point I'm making though is when they drop the vague marketing language in the Xbox Wire post about how did they phrase it exactly? Integrates intelligence directly into the graphics and compute pipeline. Like that probably does mean more than just frame gen and upscaling. Like it's probably much more granular, programmatic stuff like what we're talking about with this DirectX thing.
I mean, I think that there's frame gen upscaling. I think ray reconstruction is important, and denoising are all places that you'll see machine learning applied that to me feel inoffensive. Honestly, the thing I'm most excited about in this whole Microsoft, hey, here's what we're talking about at GDC is advanced shader delivery on Windows, because like we've seen that on Steam does that for the Steam Deck, where when you play a game on the Steam Deck, they just dole the already compiled shaders for whatever game you're playing out into the appropriate place. And it's awesome. Intel GPUs do that now too for games that they pre-compile shaders on. So like if you have an Arc GPU and you want to play a game, you don't have to sit through the shader compilation step anymore if you have the right software installed.
I've kind of wondered for a long time why this isn't done more broadly. I mean, okay, what are the variables in shader compilation? The game you're running, the graphics API / driver version, and the GPU type. Are there any others that?
I think it's which version of the GPU you have too.
Oh, you mean like in terms of like transparent revisions of the same GPU?
Yeah, or no, it's different GPU dies for like a 5070.
Oh, you mean up and down the stack?
Up and down the stack.
That's what I mean.
That's
what I mean. Which I mean literally which specific GPU, but it's just those three things, right?
I believe so. Yeah.
So that makes me. I've always wondered,
and version of DirectX, but that doesn't change very often.
Like I've always wondered, like what is the actual compatibility matrix? Like there's probably a few dozen GPUs per company that are supported at any given time, or is it more than that?
But there's a lot of drivers, and there's way more than a few dozen GPUs. Like NVIDIA, if you think about across mobile and desktop and the 5770 and the 5770 Ti and the 4080 Super, and there's I don't know, probably 90 or 100 GPUs across.
I guess I bet when you start factoring mobile, like laptop tier GPUs in, that number actually goes up pretty fast. So maybe
driver revisions.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Especially because I bet there are driver revs that don't make it out to the public that they'd still have to worry about, that 100%. Are probably getting distributed by like Dell or something like that. So like, okay, fair. At some point, managing builds for every single set of shaders across all those combinations probably is prohibitive.
When Intel told us about this, the first thought I had was, oh yeah, this is something you can do because you only have 4 GPUs.
Right.
Well, like mobile.
It totally makes sense for these integrated like Xbox handhelds and what Helix is going to be, assuming it's PC enough that, because, consoles have the same requirement. It's just that they're a single target. So like that's just the shaders are just packaged in with the game and nobody notices.
Well, it was easy for Steam Deck because similar situation, right? It's like they just respin the shader compilation on every time the driver updates.
Yeah.
But doing it on Windows is exciting, and I'm can't wait to hear more.
Yeah. So, but again, I wonder if that extends beyond these kind of integrated Xbox/PC devices to like actual computers.
This
desktop PCs. I don't know.
This says that they're doing it on Windows through the Xbox app, and that a developer can package them for submission through the Xbox app and delivery across. So
interesting.
Yeah, that's cool. That's fabulous. I'm excited about it.
I hesitate to even bring this up because I barely know what I'm talking about here, but there was a reset error thread on another GDC talk or announcement, like as we were setting up to record, like 10 minutes before we started, about some new NVIDIA Microsoft initiative they've launched just now, which is also aimed at eliminating shader stutter, but it seems to be some kind of insane compile time optimization. It's not about distributing pre-computed shaders ready to go. Like looking at the slides that they had there, like it seems to be some kind of like crazy optimization for the current paradigm, which is building the shaders as they are required in the game at runtime, right? Except not in a way that hitches your performance. Like, I don't know what kind of crazy stuff is going on with that.
But yeah, if you don't know about this, Digital Foundry has done a whole bunch of good work on this in a bunch of games over the last couple of years. And the thing that they've found is that even in games where you precompile shaders when you launch, there's a lot of games that either miss stuff to be during that precompiling phase, or it comes up later. And then when the game loop pauses to compile that shader, it causes hitching, microstutter, which is incredibly apparent to players. And like people are taking it serious. It's funny because NVIDIA has been talking about this for about 10 years now. I remember when they first rolled out G-Sync, they were talking about frame pacing and getting microstutter under control. And it's just now kind of the rest of the industry is waking up to it. And I'm excited to see that people, it's nice that people care.
Yeah. That seems like important progress. Anyway, like that's most of there's one more detail about, not just about Helix, but about where Microsoft and Xbox game compatibility is going. But before we get to that, like, I'll just throw the question out again. What is that box? Like, it's still internally, it's still going to look like a console, right? Like
it's going to look like a Steam machine.
It's well inside though. It's still going to be a single board design. It's still going to have solder on memory hooked directly to a single SoC, right? Like there's not going to be anything. Could you see anything user replaceable in that thing?
The storage.
You think they will at least let you do that?
I mean, I think I look at the distance, the change in quality of SSDs from the Xbox Series launch to now is pretty good. Like if you look at Sony's support for third-party SSDs on the PS5 has been, I think, a pretty unequivocal success, right? Like there's a handful of SKUs that the message boards tell you not to buy, but generally speaking, you plug an SSD in there and it just kind of works.
Right.
I feel like if Microsoft doesn't do that, if they do the thing that they did with the current gen, which is what do you have? Do they sell like a module or something you can add in? Is that how it works?
It's a proprietary storage card. There's a couple of them now. The launch one was made by Seagate, and then at some point Western Digital rolled out a cheaper option, but they're still proprietary in terms of physical form factor. I think under the hood they are using some standard storage bus or something, but you do have to buy the like branded Xbox storage cards still.
I would hope that they ditch that in favor of something that's more off the shelf, but maybe they won't. Who knows?
Yeah. Like my big question is just like, you crack open a console right now. It's one motherboard. There's one SoC that's got CPU and GPU on it. Like crucially, there is one shared pool of memory, which
that's going to be the same.
Right. That's what I'm getting at.
I mean, that's the way the Steam Deck works. That's the way that's the way the Steam machine is going to be too.
Yeah. So I guess all of this is kind of a solved problem already.
Yeah, they're all Strix Halos. That's I mean, and who knows, that might be that I joke, but I mean, Strix Halo is RDNA 3.5, which is a weird choice. I think probably just due to the timing on those products. But I wouldn't surprise me if the eventual hardware is something that looks like a Strix Halo with a great big pool of memory that's shared between GPU and CPU across the single APU.
That's kind of what I was getting at here is like hardware wise on the inside, this is going to look just like a traditional console. The difference is going to be in the software implementation and what they let you run on it. Right. Yeah.
For me, I mean, there's a whole spectrum, right? There's a whole weird spectrum of, like you alluded to this at the beginning. In the beginning, there was a console and there was a PC and there was a big gulf in between them. And now we increasingly are seeing PCs that are kind of console-y, and we see consoles that are kind of PC.
Yeah.
And like, who knows? Like, are they going to let you jailbreak this and put like normal ass Windows on it,
or Linux? This is two questions. A, can you jailbreak it and put Linux on it, or do you even have to jailbreak it to put Linux on it?
Yeah.
B, is it going to run normal ass Windows? Like, is it going to have the drop to a Windows desktop option like a Steam Deck does for a Linux desktop? Like, is it going to be full Windows under the hood, or is it going to be a stripped down Windows that's like, lacking certain backwards compatibility? Like I mentioned earlier, maybe it doesn't run 35 years of Windows software necessarily. Who knows?
I think that's probably a good thing, honestly. I mean, when you pair that with the Xbox mode stuff that they did with the ROG Ally X, the Xbox edition one.
Yeah, which that's coming to Windows Desktop next month, by the way, is one of the other bullet points here.
Yeah, and for folks who don't know about that, it's basically the Xbox app. You can set it to launch and go full screen, and it makes your Windows handheld a little bit more like a console.
It's basically Steam Big Picture, but for Windows/Xbox, right?
Yeah, and they do turn some stuff off in the background, so it uses a little less memory than like a normal Windows install with just the big Xbox app does. It was the reaction to it amongst like Adam Patrick Murray over at The Full Nerd spent a lot of time with it, and people who review that kind of stuff, it was pretty tepid at best.
Yeah, I remember that.
It's interesting though, because it does point to a future where Windows is just where the OS is just a thing that runs the software, and the software is either Windows or Xbox. And that to me is kind of interesting. I don't know. I don't know that Microsoft is able to make a good OS anymore.
Maybe not.
I don't feel super optimistic about that.
Yeah. Seems possible.
They also
seems probable. Seems like maybe we're seeing that borne out day by day.
Yeah, they also talked about cross compatibility for applications.
Yeah, I guess there's going to be a new version of the GDK that's supposed to make it easy to spin up builds for Windows next Xbox and current/previous Xbox, meaning Series X and S, like kind of. And I guess this I'm coming to realize as I'm talking to you and hearing about the handhelds that are out there and stuff that like some of the differences under the hood, like the memory architecture differences in terms of, on a PC, you've got system memory and graphics memory, and those are separate and communicate over a pretty slow bus versus the one pool of faster memory on. It sounds to me like at the software, at the game development level, those differences are being abstracted away already, or already have been, in a way that like maybe it is much easier to just spit out builds of, I'm not saying it's one button, but maybe it is easier to spit out builds for PC and Xbox.
I think so. I think there's two things happening. One is that the people who work at the bleeding edge of what's possible with graphics are paying attention to that stuff in a way that they always have, right?
That was my assumption, that especially like your Naughty Dogs or whatever, like they're squeezing every bit of performance out of the platform that they can based on those efficiencies that aren't there on a PC. But maybe like the smaller team on a Unity or a Unreal 5 project are having to spend less time thinking about those architectural differences, and the engine just kind of handles it in the SDK.
Yeah, it's like anything. If you have 300 people, if you're Bungie and you have 300 people working on Marathon, right? And you have a 30-person graphics team, you're going to spend more time. Your 30-person graphics team is going to spend a lot more time thinking about that. than if you're a 30-person studio and you have one guy whose job it is to do graphic stuff, right?
And at that point, you're probably, I assume, to a large degree, just relying on the tremendous amount of brute force compute that exists now compared to in the past.
Well, and the work that Epic or whoever provides your engine is doing, right? That's like you're saying, okay, we're going to what can we do that's going to make our game stand out is what, if you're a 30-person team, that's where you're at. Just to be clear, a 30-person team is like, at this point, is a pretty big indie game. Like it's not quite a AAA game. It's a big giant indie game. So like you're talking about like a Double Fine or Double Fine often has 20 to 30-person teams these days is a good example, I think.
Yeah.
So yeah, like this is a weird announcement to me because like setting up a bunch of different SDKs and a bunch of different pipelines through the game is difficult once, but it's not like an ongoing, difficult, expensive cost. Like that stuff doesn't get touched. It gets touched a lot early and it gets touched a lot during late optimization, but not really kind of in between. The things that are time consuming are like, if you're testing and you want to do testing every day, having to build 5 versions of the game for Xbox Series and Windows and Project Helix and Epic Game Store and Steam is like time consuming, and actually it has actually expensive costs because it means that you're like the fastest time you can go from putting something into testing it is many hours in some cases. And it also increases your testing service. Like if they really wanted to do something awesome here, it would be the same binary on all these devices. And that means you only have to test that binary one place. You can test it in each of the places. You make the binary once and you're done. And I haven't seen anybody talking about this. I didn't go to this session. Unfortunately, the line was really, really long and I think I had to be someplace else. But yeah, so I don't know. We'll see. More stuff will come out. They usually publish their white papers about what's coming on the platforms the week, the next week or the week after.
Oh.
So it'll be on the dev centers and we'll be able to find out what the actual meat and potatoes of this is.
Yeah, the technical implementation and what that means you can do with the machine is going to be super interesting. Here's the last quick bullet point that is kind of tucked at the bottom of that Xbox Wire post. We're committed to keeping games from 4 generations of Xbox playable for years to come. As part of our 25th anniversary later this year, we'll be rolling out new ways to play some of the most iconic games from our past.
So that's 360, Xbox One Series, and Xbox Next.
You mean the 4 generations?
That's the 4 generations.
Well,
right?
No, original Xbox.
I think Fusion Frenzy can get fucked.
Well, but those games are already backwards compatible. A ton of OG Xbox games run on a Series X.
Really?
Oh yeah. That was a big part of their. I mean, I don't know about a ton, but it's probably a few dozen. Maybe that's generous, but it's definitely like your Ninja Gaidens and, Otogi. There are definitely Xbox games, original Xbox games that run on Series X like nicely at 4K.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, it's not a ton, not as many as 360, but
yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, the Xbox One generation was kind of a small. Yeah, like it was a small generation too, right?
Yeah, I mean, most of those games run on a Series X, but really, what I'm asking here is like, what new ways to play those games are they talking about? Does that mean Xbox games on PC? Is that where this is going?
Because I don't think so.
Well, but if they're going to, if the next Xbox effectively is a PC or running Windows, and it's going to run those old Xbox games in backwards compatibility mode, they're kind of already having to port the Xbox compatibility layer to PC de facto.
We'll finally get the version of Halo 2 we all wanted that runs on Windows.
So bringing those games, is Brute Force backwards compatible? Can we finally play Brute Force on a PC? I don't know. Anyway, like, are we going to see all the 4 generations of Xbox games playable on Windows finally? Maybe.
Oh, see, I read that to mean 4 generations of Xbox games starting with the 360 and going forward, not.
No, because again, I
guess they do talk about backwards compatibility in there, so you're probably right.
In fact, I think I did an interview with Jason Ronald about backwards compatibility like 4 years ago, like right at the beginning of Nextlander or something. But my understanding, for the little bit I understand, their whole compatibility, like VM layer to run old Xbox games, is fascinating. But I think those games are all running in the same type of virtualization. Like, I think it's fairly trivial, since they already have original Xbox and 360 games running in the same basic backwards compatibility framework. I think it's pretty trivial to bring all those over.
I mean, yeah, they're all x86 except for the 360.
Like they're all, I think, being kind of like machine language translated and blah, 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 just in time recompiled or something like that. But
wild.
My guess is this means maybe those games finally show up on PC, but I really don't know.
I would like that. I mean, cool. I'm not against that. I think it's good. It's nice to be able to play old games.
Yes, I agree. Especially because original Xbox emulation is still like very, very limited, is my understanding. I don't keep up with it too closely, but
yeah, I haven't looked at it in a long time because I honestly don't know what I would play from the original Xboxes. Maybe Brute Force is probably it.
Maybe it's gotten better. I don't know, but for a while it seemed like 360 emulation was in a better state than original Xbox.
That would make sense
due to like lack of documentation stuff. Anyway, all right, real quick, the PlayStation 5 Pro news, pretty minor in light of full on next Xbox, but they've rolled out a second version of PSSR on the PS5 Pro.
This is their upscaling.
Yeah, this is their PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, I believe, is what it stands for.
It's a souped up. It's like a superset of FSR, right? Is the feeling I get.
So I think it debuted before FSR 4 on PC. But now they are saying this second version is downstream of FSR 4's launch.
That also makes sense.
Quote, with a further 6 months of refinement is how they describe it.
So I wonder who's doing the training here, because Sony is the one player that doesn't have a big giant compute cloud to do model training on. Yeah, this
blog post that Sony put up is written by Mark Cerny, and it says, the new PSSR stems from our Project Amethyst partnership with AMD. So I don't know if maybe that means in that partnership, AMD is bearing a lot of the workload of the training on this,
makes sense.
Or who knows, maybe there's some co-investment or something. But,
I mean, it could be that Sony's chucking a little cheddar into AMD sure. for the power bill, and the rising tide lifts all ships, right?
Yeah. And again, they do say this is downstream of FSR 4, so some of that work has already been done. Anyway, it's better upscaling like it is, but that's meaningful because a decent number of PS5 Pro games have gotten dinged by like the digital foundries of the world for having pretty rotten looking image quality on some of their upscaling. Like Silent Hill F is an example of one that has some like pretty obvious artifacts,
like bad ghosting and stuff.
Yeah, like it handles grass poorly and stuff like that. I want to say Star Wars Outlaws might have been another one at launch that did not look great. So here's the interesting. This is the part that actually made me bring this up, because better upscaling, kind of whatever, but they say a bunch of those games that have come out since launch will be getting manual updates to enable this better version, but they're also putting a system level toggle in to let you force on the new version in older games that do not get updates. Oh,
so it's all the good stuff of PC gaming coming to the consoles now.
Pretty much. So, yes, it's a little dodgy, and in fact, their screenshot is this. I don't know that I can enlarge this enough to read the tiny text of the system dialogue that they posted, but I guess I'm of two minds about it, but I kind of appreciate this about Sony. They have always been like this, where when they roll out a feature like this that could be forced on in older games, but it might cause problems, they just go ahead and let you do it with a tiny little disclaimer that says, disable this if you have problems. Which, again, I'm squinting at this system dialogue.
It says use an upgraded PSSR PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution model to improve image quality in some supported games. Turn this off if you experience unexpected behavior during gameplay.
That's the line. It's always been, turn this off if you experience unexpected behavior. Because they did the same thing with when the PS5 Pro came out, PS4 Pro came out.
Yeah, I remember this.
It ran at higher clocks than the base PS4, and they would let you turn that on for unsupported games that hadn't been patched to support it, with the exact same disclaimer. Just, hey, turn this off if it causes problems. You can do the same thing on a PS5 with HDR. You can try to force HDR on in games that don't support it. Like it
seems like a bad idea, Brad.
Maybe. I mean, it definitely goes against the console ethos of like everything is tested to work properly and is a guaranteed experience, right?
I don't think that's been the ethos for a while, man.
On the other hand, like guaranteed some of these older games, like I don't know, like I'm still playing through for the 5th time Silent Hill F. It's a long story.
Wow.
It is a game that is designed to be played several times to get the full story. Like it changes pretty significantly from run to run.
Like.
Yes, or a visual novel, like I guess.
Okay,
as I've come to understand, but that's a game that I actually wouldn't be super shocked if they don't update it with this new PSSR. So I appreciate having the problem, the possibility of forcing it on in that game, even if it's not supported.
I will say one of the things they talked about with the DLSS update that we'll talk about in a minute is updating the models so there's less ghosting in specific places. And like, I don't see that ghosting very much anymore. It used to be, especially in the old days of DLSS 2, it was pretty common. And these days it's much, much less of an issue. But when it does pop up, you don't want to see it. And I would hate to be stuck in a situation where I couldn't turn it off on a console.
Yeah.
But also, it's funny. I realize now when these new consoles come out, everything's going to have some sort of AI upscaling. Because like the Switch 2 has AI upscaling, the PS5 Pro, presumably the next generations of both the Xbox and the PlayStation.
Oh, absolutely. Will. I made this point on the Nextlander podcast this week. It's been interesting seeing two parallel lines of thought out there on social media. One of which is, man, Resident Evil Requiem for a Switch 2 game looks amazing. Like, it's obviously not as good as the PC or the bigger console versions, but it's like shocking how good it looks for a tiny little tablet thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's also the like justifiable or understandable sentiment that why do we need new consoles? Like, these current consoles feel like they've barely been put to use, which is true. Like, I get it. Like, there have been a lot of disruptions in the last 5 years that have made it feel like these consoles have not really gotten their due in terms of being fully utilized. All that said, though, like, what are the things on the Switch 2 that the Switch 2 is benefiting from that these consoles missed the boat on by like a year?
Yeah,
like,
I was going to say
it's ray tracing and machine learning upscaling stuff. Like those are the reasons the Switch 2 is able to turn these types of results out.
These consoles were like a year early for some real good business to hit.
Like not your typical iterative raster improvements in the way games work, which we had seen for the 20 years before that. I guess that GeForce 3 episode last week was kind of well timed, right? Because like not a whole lot had changed in the way games were rendered for 15 years or something, right?
I mean,
almost 20, but then these technologies are like significant departures from how things have been done in the past, and the current consoles just barely missed that.
The only big jump between the GeForce 3 and ray tracing was when every vendor stopped having their own shader language variant.
Yeah, sure.
And like that was an iterative kind of invisible change to users.
Like there's some DirectX changes. I mean, there's some other stuff like physically based rendering and like early attempts at global illumination and stuff like that. But those are still pretty iterative features, right? Like it's still.
Yeah. And the physicality based rendering stuff is still pretty it's not a universal soup to nuts across the entire industry thing. It's a like the right choice for some games and not the right for others.
Right. Anyway, all I'm saying is that like, yes, it's going to be a bitter pill to see newer, more expensive boxes come out not that long from now when the current ones still feel like they have untapped potential, but also like there are going to be like pretty significant improvements in those things that the rest of the games industry has just been kind of taking for granted for years now.
Well, so it's funny. I spent a bunch of time with Resident Evil Requiem this last week, I guess. And I was kind of taken by how good the high ray tracing, but not path traced version looked and ran on a I got an entirely playable 60 plus frames a second on that high ray tracing setting without upscaling, without frame gen or any of that stuff with Requiem at 4K. And then when I flipped path tracing on again without the upscaling, without the frame gen, I was getting what I think of as like Xbox 360 era console performance, right? It was like 30 frames per second, pretty reliably at 4K.
Native 4K? That's
native 4K, no upscaling, no frame gen. And like that's pretty incredible given the kind of math that's happening in that game at those scenes.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it didn't look enough better over the ray tracing high preset, which only does like ray tracing for reflection engines, shadows and stuff like that I was going to give up 50 or 60 frames a second. So anyway, we're in for a weird time. I'm wildly curious to see how consoles handle like real ray tracing, and like, are they going to start releasing path traced games for the Xbox and let people choose whether they want decent shadows and decent reflections or like fully modeled lighting? And like, it's going to be a wild time.
I mean, it's going to be interesting once every current platform has caught up on these technologies and has very competent baseline implementations of them, because the Switch already does. Like the Switch 2 has this stuff already. So, but like consoles still largely dictate where development goes, right? Like
they set the baseline, I think.
Right.
That
like
in the Steam Deck.
Like you're only going to do so much to a PC port when,
unless somebody writes a check.
Sure. Yeah. But anyway, it's going to be, but supply costs, cost of living, like everything is like, who knows when those consoles are even going to launch and how many people are going to be able to afford them. So like, will games even get made for them? Are we going to be looking at 3 years or 4 years of cross-gen development? Who knows? Like, it's all going to be so bumpy.
It wouldn't surprise me if split dev ends up being the watchword for most mass market titles that aren't first party exclusives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of first party exclusives, we don't have this on the list, but there was a rumor last week that Sony's backing down from PC.
Yes.
Did anything come out officially one way or the other on that, or is it still just like?
I can't imagine they will ever address that. You'll just see it reflected in the release calendar.
Yeah,
it's certainly not something for them to celebrate if that's the way they're going, or that's not something that's going to go over well. So they will just quietly stop announcing PC ports.
Boo.
Boo. Yeah. Interesting times out there. Should we just wrap up on the DLSS 4.5 since we were talking about upscaling? Yeah, we can do that since we're talking about
GDC stuff. Yeah.
Doesn't sound like a ton new with that, but there's one big thing.
They had a lot of interesting. They had a lot of design wins, as I think what I'd call them. So they showed like the James Bond game that IO is making is going to have full path tracing. They talked about the mega geometry support that originally rolled out in Alan Wake is coming to some other games. I think most notably Control Resonant. And those are things that make ray tracing performant in types of areas that typically ray tracing wouldn't be performant in. That mega geometry thing, it like basically groups up triangles together or something so that like you can do fewer math calculations on ray tracing in like really complicated scenes like forests and stuff like that. The thing that I think was the big win that was kind of quiet and people didn't get super excited about is that DLSS 4.5 allows you to set a frame gen target frame rate. So you say, I want to run at my monitor's refresh rate and I want you to generate frames to get to that point, but not because currently on frame gen, if you do 2x, every other frame is generated, whether that takes you to your monitor's frame rate or 90 frames a second or, 2 times your monitor's frame rate. And this, with the addition of 6x frame gen frame rates for the DLSS 4.5, I really think that just set it to my monitor's frame rate is the thing that we should have had from the beginning on this. Yeah,
that was my first reaction to this was, why wasn't it this way from the beginning? I certainly don't know, but it seems like having a more deterministic target might help for optimizing for latency or consistency in performance.
It turns out like this topic is fractally complicated.
Yeah, like I shouldn't even try to comment on it because it's way beyond me.
It has to do like there's a million places that the frame timing can go wrong. Starting at the beginning of the graphics pipeline when you're playing the game and the game freezes while a shader compiles, all the way up to the connection between the monitor's frame buffer and the display gets overwhelmed and frames come in faster for a second for a millisecond and slower for a millisecond, and anywhere along that way your experience can be bad. If you have everything best case, then yeah, it seems like this is more what I would have wanted, which is, hey, if the real frame is lagging here, it'll dump a generated frame in.
That makes more sense to me, just to get to a specific baseline frame rate.
Yeah, rather than install.
Yeah, as opposed to just give me as many as you can.
It seems good.
In a perfect world, I would still rather not deal with generated frames, but my gut feeling is they are just like frame gen is just going to be a fact of life on the next consoles.
What I will say,
so like improvements are good in that technology because we're going to be living with it one way or another.
What I'll say is that I wasn't hugely bought into frame gen on the 4 series cards. And I don't like it very much on the AMD cards with FSR4 or on the Intel cards. Playing with the controller is fine. The input latency of a controller and the kind of like the lag that comes with the sticks is fine. But like one of the things I always do when I would test frame, when I'm in a demo and they're like, hey, you want to see our frame gen? I'm like, yeah, let me see it. I grab the mouse and keyboard and I pick a spot on the monitor on the scene and I try to move my mouse and lock in directly to landing on that spot, which is something that with low latency, you should be able to do like 9 times out of 10 if you play a lot of first person shooters with a mouse and keyboard. And on the 4 series cards on NVIDIA and on all of the AMD and Intel implementations I've tested, it's hard to do that. It requires changing the way my brain interprets mouse movement to overcome the frame latency. On the DLSS 4 implementation that shipped on the 5 series cards, I don't notice a difference.
Interesting.
And it's because it's because they take a moment right at the end of the pipeline and shift the rendered frame, to match the mouse movement, and then fill in the pixels, the gaps with machine learning generated pixels. And it works really well. Now there's a little bit of artifacting sometimes, and I still don't ever turn it on for multiplayer games, but like on single player stuff, it's pretty indistinguishable. So
the concerning thing to me is that's the NVIDIA state of the art, which AMD has not caught up to yet. So like what frame gen capability are these consoles going to launch with? I don't know. Are we going to be in a situation where like we're like one iteration of AMD's frame gen too early for it to be good for another 7 years?
I think that they have the hardware in place to do the same thing that NVIDIA is doing right now. I guess
the software stack can evolve post launch, right?
Yeah, and also on the gamepad, I don't think the latency matters as much.
Yeah.
I do think that a performance mode where everything's turned down, like the thing I fear is that the new normal for all consoles going forward is that you choose between performance and good looking mode, and maybe the performance mode doesn't have the generated frames because that adds a little bit of latency. So,
yeah, that would be unfortunate if all the performance options are frame gen next generation. Anyway, much to find out over the coming months and years.
Okay, so let's talk. Let's talk about Apple's new hardware.
Yeah,
because this had been rumored for a while, I think.
Yeah, there was a lot of it, but there's only one actually new thing. I mean, they announced like M5 Pro laptops, but that's just iterative. Basically, I mean, there's some interesting stuff with the way they're designing their SoCs now for those, but I don't think they're doing some vertical stacking of dies, which I didn't quite understand, but
that's cool.
I don't think we have to get into that here, but the MacBook Neo is the actual interesting new product line.
Yeah. The top line on that is that it's a $600, small MacBook running an A18 Pro, which is last year's iPhone Pro chip.
Yeah. Which is like insane that we're at the point where a phone processor can now run a laptop, but
I mean, we've been trying it. People have been trying it for more than a decade, and it just has kind of always sucked.
Fair.
But it's a 6-core part. It's 2 performance cores, 4 efficient cores.
Did you? I'm sorry. Can I stop you really quick?
Yes.
This cannot be relevant to the A18 Pro and the MacBook Neo because it is an existing chip from last year. Did you see what they've done to the core branding on the M5 Pro and Max?
No.
The E cores are now P cores. They now call their efficiency cores performance cores.
And what do they call the performance cores?
The performance cores are now super cores.
What?
Super cores and performance cores.
Are they using last gen? Is this like an Intel thing where they're using last gen performance cores as efficient cores?
I don't think so.
Or is this just marketing?
My guess, because it's Apple, is that it's just marketing. I mean, I'm sure there's some performance uplift, and maybe there is some difference in kind rather than degree that allows them to justify this change. I just think it's a very funny Apple-like thing to do. Like they're literally just saying like our E cores are better than your P cores.
Okay.
Anyway, go on.
I have questions about naming that we're going to talk about in a little bit, but
okay.
It's the gotcha on this is that it's an 8 gigabyte RAM config. So it's 8 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM and 256 gigs of storage on these models.
Do they still sell an 8 gigabyte Air, right?
I don't think they do currently. I think the last year's or year before's was the most recent 8 gigabyte Air.
Let me just check real fast.
I will tell you, my wife anecdotally has an M1 MacBook from 2020 with 8 gigabytes of RAM because I didn't want to spend the extra $500 or whatever it was to get the 16 gig model. And Mac OS, like this is the benefit Apple has in today's current RAM constrained environment. Mac OS, like Linux, pretty good on low RAM, it turns out.
Yeah. Yeah. Although one of the ways they do that on the current MacBooks is that they page very aggressively to the SSD, which is so fast that it's an appreciable fraction of system memory speed at this point, which certainly
probably
helps.
add some wear to your SSDs,
yes,
though. Huh?
It helps. It helps with system responsiveness, but the little bit I've looked at it, it's certainly slowly eroding the write tolerance on your storage.
So when those stories broke last year, I went and looked at the wear on my wife's laptop just to see. And it turns out if you're mostly just using it to browse the web, you're probably fine. If you're doing heavier workloads, you probably want 16 gigs of RAM.
So I just looked. The current MacBook Air, which is they're M5s now. Yes, it is an M5 Air that they've moved to, and it is baseline 16 gigabytes now.
Yeah, which is like I tested a Linux machine with 16 gigs the other day and was fine. I think this is like, look, we're going to see ads about RAM. I don't think Apple's ever going to do ads about RAM, but if they did, they would be ragging on Microsoft for the amount of RAM Windows uses these days.
Sure. Yeah. I can see it.
Okay. So it's $599. You can get, if you have an .edu email address, then you can get it for $500.
Which this is, okay, I know this is not in Chromebook price territory, but this is basically the closest they're ever going to get to a Chromebook competitor, right? I mean, that's kind of what this is, right?
Well, so we talked about this on the Full Nerd a little bit this week, but the fattest part of the PC market, from what we could tell based on like traffic to laptop review pages on PC World's website, is that $500 to $600 price range.
So that is definitely above the Chromebooks are like $200-$300, right?
Well, they used to be.
Oh, I guess everything is more now.
Yeah, I mean, you can get expensive Chromebooks, but like there's definitely a bump at like 250. It used to be 250 to $300. Now it's probably 350 to 400. This is the, hey, my kid needs a laptop for school, but I'm not buying him a gaming laptop price range, right? And their marketing for it strongly implies that they're looking at that they noted that there needed to be a product between an iPad that you give a young kid and a MacBook that you give to somebody when they go to college.
Sure.
And this seems to be filling that hole. It's a little bit smaller keyboard. I got to get hands on with one this week. Yeah, Roman brought their review sample by the Full Nerd, and we talked about it at length. His testing seemed to indicate that the performance was really comparable to a 2020 era M1 MacBook Air.
Okay, it's nothing.
It's worth mentioning that last Christmas, one of the biggest sellers in the laptop space was that $600 M1 2020 like stripped down MacBook 2020 M1 MacBook Air that Walmart was selling for $600 or $699.
I remember that. Yeah.
It's a little bit smaller keyboard, he said, but it feels solid in a way that like laptops, PC Windows laptops in this price range do not feel. Like it's still the unibody aluminum construction. The keyboard's really nice. The trackpad isn't the haptic one. It's a regular physical trackpad with a click.
Interesting.
And it has a Retina display that has some screwy resolution. It was like 2076 by, I don't know. It was a usable resolution. I'm like I said, I used it for a little bit.
Also a range of fun colors.
And almost all of the marketing showed young girls and teens using a laptop.
Sure.
So to me, this says, hey, we want to get the part of the market that doesn't care about video games.
Yep.
The other gotcha is the USB ports because it's because it's an A18 and there's not a big USB bus on that thing. You get you get two USB-C ports. One of them's USB 3 and one of them's USB 2.
Well, I mean, we can answer this because the units are out there, but how likely do you think it is that they label which is which?
The front one's USB 2 and the back one's USB 3.
But do they make any other?
Nope.
I didn't think so. But user beware.
Yeah, it seems it's like, I think the other thing is you can only hook one external monitor up to it.
Okay. Yeah.
Which kind of makes sense given the price range. It feels like an arbitrary, but whatever.
Well, and probably just there's some limitation on the display hardware, I'm sure.
Yeah. To me, like this feels like a big deal in that Apple's never cared about this market before.
Yeah. I mean, but like not on laptops, you're right. Like they've toyed with, the iPhone SE has kind of like slowly trickled out or, just kind of been quietly hanging around in the background for a while. And then now they're doing the E models on the phones, which are not as discounted as I would like, but there is at least a cheaper phone option. Like they seem to have been forced kicking and screaming to admit that there is a big market for lower priced stuff.
Yeah, to me, I'm not sure if this is, hey, there's a hole in our market and we're losing customers to it, which is kind of like, you like I said, young kids are, a lot of them have iPads.
Yeah, it's more about market growth probably, right? Or it's more of it's an untapped price segment that they would like to expand into.
That's my assumption. Also, I think they probably have an advantage over comparable Windows vendors in that I don't think you can ship an 8 gig Windows laptop without people going ballistic.
Probably not. Like there are, we just described one with the memory management and the storage, but like there are profound advantages to vertically controlling the entire hardware and software stack.
Oh, 100%. I really personally, like, I want this exact thing, except for I want an iPad that runs Mac OS and can also run iPad apps and use the touch interface.
When they announced the very first iPad, I was convinced that's where things were going, and they never actually got there. I
mean, this gives me hope because, like, I look at that, like, we're literally in this situation. My daughter's using an old hand-me-down Windows laptop but her iPad is pandemic era and she's outgrown it, right? Like she does a lot of artwork and I want to be able to get her something that she has pencil support on. But also I don't want her to have 4 laptop sized computers that she has to keep up with. But like when she's tried to use my iPad for school stuff, it just doesn't, like, the browser's not sufficient. Yeah. It always has problems.
Yeah. I mean, it's a shame because the current iPad Pro hardware is clearly capable enough to run actual Mac OS. I mean, here we have a freaking phone processor doing it. Yeah. They just don't want to do that because presumably they would love to sell you both an iPad and a MacBook.
Look, I would happily pay the price of an iPad and a MacBook that's that does both. I mean, arguably, when you buy an iPad Pro and a keyboard, you're paying the price of an iPad and a MacBook now.
Yep.
Anyway.
Yeah. Can I?
Yes.
I have one. What's the term? Bugaboo. There's one little thing about MacBooks that have been bugging me. I love my M1 Pro.
What's the deal with MacBooks?
Like, it is the best laptop I've ever used by a lot. Mm-hmm. Like, it's crazy how good they are. So you have an Air in the house, so I guess you know what I'm talking about here. I really hate the hard edge on the aluminum body.
You slice cheese with?
Where you rest your wrists.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Apple has got the best. Apple introduced me to the term chamfering.
Yep.
Like, Apple has the best automatic lathes or whatever the fuck industrial machinery for shaving.
Mills is what would do that. Yeah.
For, the types of machinery that shave aluminum into specific shapes. They could put just the slightest rounding on that edge on the laptop and it would feel so much more comfortable to lay your wrists on.
But then the top wouldn't line up with the bottom.
That's why they did. But that's why they could make it the most, like, the very shallowest angle of rounding on that edge possible, and it would still look fine when it was closed, and also not slice your forearms open.
Yeah, it's still the sharp edges on this one. Unfortunately,
there's still sometimes a bit aesthetics over usability in some spots.
Look, they're all about form over function.
Yeah, I know.
So the one thing I wondered is this naming thing is new, right? Neo's a new name for Apple.
Yeah, and I don't know that, like, I mean, obviously, Neo literally means new, but I don't know that it communicates what they're trying to communicate.
Well, so,
like, I'm not sure where they're going with this name because it doesn't, when you hear it, it doesn't necessarily scream. Like, it could mean anything in terms of, like, how powerful it is the thing. Like, it doesn't communicate pricing and capability.
So I wonder if they think that the iPhone minis didn't sell because they were called minis and nobody wants the small one for babies.
Wait, hang on. You're not saying there's going to be an iPhone Neo, are you?
That's my theory. Yeah.
Really?
I bet that they bring back the mini as a Neo.
Interesting. That would make a lot of people happy. There are, like,
I love that thing.
Tons. I really like my iPhone 17. I have basically gotten used to the size and the, the edge to edge screen and everything. It still might be a hair too, even after 2 straight months of it. It still might be just a tiny bit bigger than I would like. So I might be in the market for a mini iPhone if it became a Neo.
My daughter has a mini as the last mini. She has a 13 mini, right. And I would. Okay, I do have old guy eyes now, and I have to get readers or some sort of other glasses.
Yeah, the big screen is nice for that.
Yeah, but big screen aside, it is so nice to have a phone that your thumb can hit the entire screen on.
Yep. What is the name for their, like, shift the entire screen down half the screen height?
I don't think they do that anymore, do they?
It's still in there. Yeah. You can still do it, but that's a poor substitute for being able to just cover the entire phone with your thumb.
Bad hack. Yep. So anyway, that's my...
I would like to see that.
I think that like they've been dancing around different ways to brand the small phone. And I wonder if Neo is the new thing that means small.
Okay.
Anyway,
right.
Last hardware hit. This is the last thing I think. Intel,
pretty minor one.
Yeah, Intel announced new Core Arrow Lake CPUs.
Yeah,
so these are the desktop hardware that came out end of 2024.
Yes, Arrow Lake came like September 2024.
Yeah,
I think.
fall, I guess. Yeah,
I keep a decent eye on CPU news. This is the very long rumored Arrow Lake refresh. This has been rumored for like a year. And finally, it is only in the final analysis. It's only 2 SKUs.
Well, it's 4 SKUs, but 2 of them are the same as the other 2.
It's K and KF variants of each.
The F variants are no graphics, right?
Yes, or it's the KF, right? It's K and KF.
The KF variant doesn't have graphics on board, right. I believe, is the difference.
K does, I believe. So the rumors were that it's Core old. It's basically a 5 and a 9, or I'm sorry, a 5 and a 7. Excuse me. There is no 9. I hate that they dropped the I.
It's the mid range and the low end, but not the high end.
i5 and i7 and i9 were for some reason easier to say or more identifiable. When
it's
you
just because they've been around for a long time.
Well, I know, but when you just say 5, that doesn't mean any much unless you really establish a Core 5, Core Ultra 5. Like the branding, I feel like is worse.
But I think the unit, like a number without, my chemistry teacher, Mr. Tung, always used to say, if you give me a number without a unit, it doesn't mean anything.
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's your chemistry teacher knew what he was talking about.
But yeah.
Sure. So there was a it's 250K and 270K, which build on the 245K and 265K. There was
do they, Brad?
Well, okay, yes, it's actually complicated. Well, in the product lineup, they'd build on those products in the internal composition of the chip. Maybe
TBD.
Maybe it's the other direction. But the reason I bring that up is that until a month or two ago, there was a rumored 290K coming that apparently got killed off at some point a couple months ago, or maybe earlier. So there is no successor to the 285K is what I'm saying here. The high end, the high end chip does not get a successor. The weird thing though is that the 7 part now has the same core configuration as the 285K, as the 9.
That's very strange.
And the 5 part has the same core configuration as the old 7 part.
Wow, that's shocking. Actually, it doesn't. It has 2 more cores, doesn't it?
I think it's parity. So the 7 definitely has 8 and 16.
The 7 is the same, yeah.
And the 5 is now 6 and 12.
Oh, okay.
Which I'm pretty sure is what the 7 was previously. Or maybe you're right. Maybe the 7 was 8 and 12 previously.
I think it was 8 and 12.
Yeah, I think that's right, actually. Maybe they're disabling a couple of cores.
To me, it seemed like the 270 is, hey, we have some Core Ultra 9s that didn't hit clocks on all the cores. And the 250 is, hey, we have some 265s that maybe had some cores that were a little wonky.
That's definitely how it looks to me. Basically, the 7 part is the same core configuration as the 285K, but like 200 megahertz less boost clock.
Yeah.
So what you're describing makes sense until you look at their slides where they're all over the place saying fastest Intel gaming CPU to date.
Well, so I think there's 2 things that happened here. One is that they are supporting faster memory. So they're supporting DDR5 7200, and it's unclear exactly what form that takes because they support different kinds of RAM now too. They support the CUDIM
thing.
Yeah.
So those are the ones with the clock drivers on the DIMM.
Basically,
right? Yeah. Do you need that at 7200?
That is a question I'm dying to know the answer to, Brad.
Interesting. I thought you only saw those at like 8,000 and above or something.
I don't know. As somebody who used to run a 7200 DDR5 system and it didn't last that long. I have some thoughts here.
Interesting.
What I will say is this 270K plus seems like Intel continuing the tradition of making some really badass mid-range parts. Like if you look back at like the Raptor Lake refresh stuff, the 13700K and the 14700K, problems with that platform aside,
those were the sweet spot. The 7,
unbelievable chips for the money.
i7 was, and this is again same core configuration as a 285K, but it's only $299 versus like what is the 9 part is like 500 and something.
I don't know what that's what it launched at. The street price is lower now because like people are buying X3D Radeons instead.
but $299 MSRP for this thing, and so
it's a good deal.
And there's one other improvement here, which seems like the actual improvement, which is they say that there is a 900 megahertz increase in the speed between the SoC and compute tiles. Like the SoC is where the memory controller lives, and the compute tiles is where all the CPU cores are.
And so
that's like, I think it was 2.1 gigahertz on that interconnect on the initial Arrow Lake, and now it's 3 gigahertz. And I wonder if that's where a lot of the gaming uplift is coming from.
So one of the things that we talked about at PC World a lot when I was benchmarking, because like I ended up doing most of the Arrow Lake benchmarking because Adam got COVID or something. He was sick. He had the flu real bad or something. And one of the things that was interesting about those boards is in the BIOS, you can configure, you have really granular control over a lot of bus speeds.
Yeah. So I read that there's a name for that. I forget what Intel called it, but they did roll out a UEFI feature where you could up the speed of that interconnect on the launch Arrow Lake ones. But I wonder, so what does that mean? Is this a bigger increase than those, or is this a more of a guaranteed?
My guess is if they're saying it's faster, then they're actually shipping it at a faster clock.
Yeah.
But it, like, that's with because the way I can't remember the way Arrow Lake works, the way Panther Lake works, some of the efficient cores are on the SoC tile with all the IO stuff. 4 of them are. Yeah,
those are the LDE cores, I want to say.
Yeah. And then the other ones are on with the shared L3 cache on the compute die. So I don't know. It's interesting. I'm glad that they're doing it. I'm kind of stoked to see new benchmarks for these CPUs, because like I know that they had a bad launch. Everybody in 2024 had bad launches. Everybody messed up those launches in novel and interesting ways. I've seen a couple of YouTube videos where people have gone through and tested the launch Core Ultra Arrow Lake parts and had kind of surprisingly good results.
Yeah, there's been, like, Phoronix actually ran a Linux benchmark test suite in that exact vein of basically it was like Arrow Lake 1 year later or something with all kind of microcode and UEFI updates. And there were in some cases, there were like pretty substantial performance gains on the benchmarks they ran since launch.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't know. We'll see what the numbers say whenever the embargo lifts.
My curiosity is kind of piqued about this 270K, because I've been pretty itchy about this 14900K.
Yeah, it's scary. You got a ticking time bomb there, baby.
It's like I had a black screen of death once not long ago, which I've never seen before.
Hold on. Was it the screen just turned off, or did you have a blue screen that was black?
It was a blue screen. It had white text on it. The one thing I hate about the way Microsoft handles Windows hard crashes these days is that they never stay on screen long enough to absorb the information.
You can change that by having it write a full dump instead of a mini dump.
Oh, I should figure out how to do that then, because it was only on screen for like 2 seconds and then it hard rebooted, and I had just enough time to read something about some kind of like fatal hypervisor error.
Yeah.
And I've got a WSL2 instance running pretty much at all times, so I'm sure it was something to do with that, but like there's been a little bit of jank to the system, and also like the Raptor Lake just is insanely hot, like it just sucks a ridiculous amount of power. So like I'm kind of curious about this thing, if this thing is actually like even comparable or slightly faster in games over what I've got. Like I don't know, maybe
it's going to be slower than the 14900K.
Well, but I mean maybe, but their slides say fastest gaming CPU Intel has made. Yeah, like, but you tell me if that's like based on X, Y, and Z external factor that like benchmarks are marketing benchmarks are a fine art, right? I assume.
Look, once they started getting sued for securities violations because they had cooked benchmarks, people have been real serious about internal marketing benchmarks now.
That's good. But like, frankly, though, even if it was comparable or even just a tad bit slower, like I was looking at some 285K comparisons to what I've got recently. Like we're talking in games like 60 to 100 watts less consistently, like 20 to 30 degrees cooler. Well, like that's pretty fucking big. Like I would happily give up like 5 to 10% game performance for efficiency gains like that, frankly.
Well, so it's interesting because that's the thing that I think about a lot, because I'm on that 9800X3D these days, and it's 8 cores, and I often am doing stuff that could use more than 8 cores.
Yep.
But I also play games fairly regularly, and like, would I sacrifice a little bit of gaming performance for more perf when I'm doing heavy workloads? Yeah, probably at this point.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's interesting. I'm glad they're out there doing this. I'm excited to see what the numbers look like.
Also seems like maybe a good sign for Nova Lake. I don't know. We'll see.
I think the Panther Lake stuff is much more of a good sign for Nova Lake. Yeah. The Panther Lake benchmarks have been pretty promising from what I've seen. So
yeah, I am news about Panther Lake and Wildcat Lake and sort of embedded NUC mini PC type Panther Lake boxes is agonizingly slow in trickling out. I am like dying to see where that stuff ends up.
Well, so Brad, I've been running a 245K on the stream machine for the last little bit in my office, and like even running the Twitch enhanced broadcasting stuff, which is like, doing 6 streams or something like that from 1440p 60 on down. The top 2 or 3, I think, run on the GPU, but the rest are just running on the CPU. Like the 320 by 200 one runs on the CPU for obvious reasons.
Wow. Is that automatic? Do they select that resolution automatically, or did you tell it to do that?
No. So the Twitch enhanced broadcasting, it does all the resolutions that you feed out, and then they just repeat them, so that your latency on like phones and TVs and stuff like that is low.
That's right? Like a phone. That's a phone resolution, basically.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Or like in a window on your desktop, probably.
Right. I guess they're dynamically scaling what they're feeding you based on the size of the viewport.
Yep. And it's been really solid even on like the baby CPU.
So most of those encodes are running on the integrated GPU.
It looks like most. No, they're running on an external GPU. And then the big ones run on the external GPU. The small ones run on the CPU,
just
software. With FFmpeg. Yeah, in software.
Oh, wild.
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah, and it's still like 6% CPU utilization. It hardly does anything.
Yeah, like my fan, especially since I stopped using fan control in Windows and tried to start doing stuff through the BIOS.
Oh, good luck with that.
I mean, it sucks. Like I've gotten close to what I had in fan control, but it still spins up and down more than I like. But like this thing, I launched Discord and this thing roars for a couple seconds, that's just.
Well, you're on an air cooler too.
I am on an air cooler. Yes.
You got to get it. So
yeah,
like running an air cooler on a 14900K. That's the choice.
Yeah.
Got to get that AIO life. Get that water in there to buffer your temperatures.
I looked at whichever AIO Gamers Nexus says is the absolute best.
Oh, the Arctic Cool.
Yes, the Arctic. What is it? Arctic Cooler?
Arctic Cool 3. There's the Frozone 3 or something. There's basically the 360 and the 280 are basically the same amount of cooling.
Like the one that they unequivocally said was the best performer. I looked at it. It has a mandatory contact frame.
Yep.
And
only for LGA, only for Intel CPUs. For AMD, it's
dude, I want nothing. After my experience getting the contact frame working on this Raptor Lake, I want nothing to do with contact frame ever again.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of contact frames.
It took so many tries to get the tension or whatever exactly right, so it would boot stably.
That cooler is great for AM4 and AM5. I wouldn't use it for Intel.
Yeah, that's a real bummer. Anyway, like long story. Oh, sorry. There's one other thing about this, which is that they are adding a feature called binary optimization.
Oh yeah, the BPO,
like the
BOT.
BOT. It's the BOT feature in the APO.
Yeah,
the BOT in the APO. I believe it's in APO, which is what is that? The application.
It's the thing that manages the overclock for games, basically.
The application optimization. I mean, AMD has an equivalent, right? Isn't there a Ryzen utility that does basically the same thing? It's one of those things that like identifies which of your cores are the best performing and stuff like that, or the
Ryzen Master does that. Maybe I don't usually run that stuff.
Yeah, I don't either, and that's why I'm a little. Skeptical is not the right word, but there's kind of an asterisk next to this, which is that. Anyway, there's this binary optimization feature that is now, I think, part of the APO application.
Okay.
And it sounds like, I'm guessing their benchmarks, well, they had asterisks next to the games that did reflect using that tool. Like the big, 20, 30% performance gains they were showing looked like they all required that tool. So what does that mean for people who game in Linux is my question, because that tool obviously is not available in Linux. So
piss off.
Right. So I assume you tell me, but I'm sure every hardware site will test with and without that application to see what the difference is.
Generally, when there's a new feature that comes along, somebody takes the time to learn how it works, and then we have a long conversation about how it works and decide if we're going to use it for benchmarking.
Interesting. Okay.
My guess, thinking about it, you'd asked about hey, this is our fastest gaming CPU ever. I wonder if that's specifically. I wonder if that's specifically because of the memory DDR5 7200.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a big part of it too. And
Because,
in fact, well, yeah.
If you're looking at like Unreal 4 games that are almost all memory bandwidth limited,
Yeah.
and then you increase your memory bandwidth by like 12% or whatever that is, 8%, you're going to see a boost, just like a linear boost just from that increase in memory bandwidth.
Yeah, that is something to think about. My memory is 6,000 and I sure ain't buying any new memory anytime soon. So I don't know if that might be a constraining factor actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I looked at, I looked up a DDR5 7200 kit and it was $800 for 32 gigs. Yeah. No thanks.
Dude, the SSD I bought in November has more than doubled in price. It was like $300 then, and it's $722 now. Bad times.
Yeah, bad times. Well, on that note, thanks everybody for listening to the show. I guess we could also talk about the Valve hardware delay.
It seems like not non-news. They some in their year-end review 2025, some language slipped out about we hope to ship the Steam Machine and frame this year.
In 2026.
Right. Which was a far cry from when they were saying, yeah, we'll be out in the first half.
Yeah.
And then but they very quickly backpedaled, and like it says very explicitly like will ship in 2026, but that's still a soft delay.
Yeah.
Because previously they had said in first half by June.
Well, look,
and now they're saying will ship this year.
Look, that's a real masterclass in how to do a delay without getting grief for it. Cause like they did the bad delay and they were like, oh, no, that was a mistake. Yeah. Everything's cool. And then, here, nobody's talking about we're not shipping in the first half anymore.
Yep. Good job.
Thanks, AI.
Yeah.
That'll do it for us this week. Thanks everybody for listening.
Thank you.
As always, thanks to everybody who supports the show. We wouldn't be here without you all.
We wouldn't.
We are listener supported. That means without listeners, not you, but them, Brad.
And their support.
Yeah, and their support. We wouldn't be here. So thanks to everybody who support. To find out how to support the show, this is an important thing I have to say every week. You go to patreon.com/techpod. Brad, do you know what that URL is?
Is it patreon.com/techpod?
It is patreon.com/techpod, where for $5 a month, I used to say it was like a cup of coffee, but I went to Starbucks the other day and got a cup of coffee and it was $9.
Good God. Was that like a fancy with stuff in it? Just literal black coffee?
It was it was a latte, but it was a big latte.
Man.
I mean, it was look, realistically kind of a bucket, but I needed a coffee.
We're moving into a real like rice and beans kind of lifestyle here, I'm afraid.
Look, I made soup beans 2 weeks ago for Sunday dinner and everybody was a fan. So
we really got to batten down the hatches. I mean, we collectively as a society, things are wild.
Let me suggest, what if we invest in torches and pitchforks?
That's also
Think
an
about
option.
it.
Yeah. That requires a certain amount of gumption, but
look, we buy some torches, we buy some pitchforks, we start walking east and just see where it takes us.
Sure.
But in lieu of that, you can also go to patreon.com/techpod and support the show so we don't have to resort to torches and pitchforks. As always, thanks to everybody who supports us, but a very special thank you goes out to our executive producer tier patrons, including OpenAI Delenda Est, Andrew Slosky, Jordan Lippett, Fiends5, Bunnies, but in Australia, I think Bunny Fiend must be on vacation, David Allen, James Kamek, and Pantheon, makers of the HS3 high-speed 3D printer. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you to all.
We will be back next week with another edition of the Tech Pod. I realized I didn't tell people what they get when they subscribe, but you get access to the Patreon exclusive episode every month where we talk about whatever crazy business Brad's cooking up that he was like, I'm not ready to talk about it this week.
Man, I've been hard at work in the lab.
Yeah. And then
the NAS backup thing is in progress.
Oh,
it has grown in complexity substantially.
Oh, hell yeah. This is going to be good. Can't wait to hear about this. And then, you also get access to the Discord, which is full of beautiful people who talk about all sorts of nerdy stuff all the time. If you want more Pi Moroni talk, let me tell you, you can go in there and they are all up in that business.
It is Pi Moroni who makes that sign?
Yeah, that makes that
programmable sign?
The galactic unicorn or whatever it is. Yeah.
They make that Pibo case.
They made the GitHub conference badges that you can play Doom on too.
Cool.
Yeah, they make a bunch of cool stuff.
They do cool stuff.
But we'll be back next week with another edition of the Tech Pod. Until then, please consider the environment before printing this podcast.